take a look at some African issues as South African President Cyril Ramaphosa on Monday this week responded to a threat issued by his United States counterpart Donald Trump to cut funding to the African nation after accusing it of confiscating land and treating certain classes of people very badly. Writing on his Truth Social platform, Trump stated that the embargo on funding would not be lifted pending the conclusion of investigations. In his response on Monday via his X handle, President Ramaphosa noted that the democratic nation of South Africa respects the rule of law, justice and equity, noting that the government hasn't confiscated any land. Well, African Affairs analyst Dr. Victor Okhai joins us now to discuss this high-profile back and forth and what possible signal Trump might be sending to Africa. Good afternoon and welcome to the program.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
All right, let's get straight into it. For myself as a Zimbabwean, this gives me a sense of PTSD because we've been through this process of land reform and we've seen some of the consequences of land reform and the responses from the global West. What's your take on this? Is this a right time for Cyril Ramaphosa to embark on the land reform under the Expropriation Act, or do you think it'll shake up too many geopolitical tensions?
Okay, so let me start from where we are, Nigeria. Several years ago, the government in its wisdom enacted the Land Use Act, where all land is vested in the governor of the state, which means that for you to get any land, you need the governor's consent, and then from there you can get your CFO. Only the governor gives you a CFO. And if there's a land that is meant for the public interest, of course you will get compensated for it, but the government can then say, look, we need this in the interests of the public. And so every country has a right to decide what's best for it. And it's the same thing with land. Now, South Africa is an independent and sovereign nation. And another country cannot begin to dictate to it what is right and what is not. I mean, if they're talking about expropriation or the Expropriation Act now of land and all that, like what happened in Zimbabwe. In Zimbabwe, it's like redistribution. It's like looking at the injustice that has been perpetrated to say, okay, look, there's been injustice here. No one talked while the injustice lasted. And then they decided, look, let there be a redistribution of this. Because land is, honestly, is wealth and it's limited, and so for Trump to come and suddenly do this, although it's not without reasons, we will look at that maybe as we go on, but I think that America should learn to mind its business and let people do what they're doing. I mean, what they think is in their best interest, So it wasn't done illegally. This was a proper act, act of parliament and all of that, a process, and that's what it is. So it's not like, it might think, okay, it's targeted against a few people, but again, there are lobbyists and there are people who are responsible for this. We will talk about it if there's time.
All right.
Yeah.
Well said. Well, when we consider South Africa's historical context, there's a question that's being asked whether this is really about property rights or an attempt to maintain economic dominance on the continent.
When you say maintain economic dominance, are you talking about America maintaining economic dominance on the continent? No, repeat the question again.
Okay. When you look at South Africa's historical context, and of course this Trump's intervention that we're discussing, is this really about property rights? That's a question that's being asked, or is this an attempt by America to maintain dominance, economic dominance in Africa?
I think the latter is more of it. It's like, you want to assert yourself, but they're doing it the wrong way. They have competition with China. China is doing the same thing that China is taking over so many lands, but the only thing is that they're doing it legally. They offer poor countries money and just buy over the land, and taking advantage of their poverty, in these countries and all that. So, but America, or should I say Trump, he prefers to, bully his way or bulldoze his way through. Before entering power, he was already talking about, let me use the word now, expropriating Greenland, making Canada the 51st state of the U.S., and talking about renaming the Panama Canal and all of that. I mean, who does that? So his method is rather crude, and So he believes he can bully his way through. The latest now is that, he wants to evacuate people from Gaza, the inhabitants of Gaza, and make it an American. You've not heard? Okay. So, I mean, that's a rather crude way of asserting American dominance. And the truth is, when you see anybody or any nation begin to act like that, it obviously means that they're losing out. And I interpret it as an act of desperation.
All right, well, let's talk about that American relationship with, specifically with South Africa. Yes. Of course, we know that the biggest part of that relationship is defined by AGOA. Yes. And South Africa exports about 14 billion yes. per annum of automotives yes.
To the automotives now. I'm talking about
yes.
AGOA.
To the US duty-free.
Yes. Yes.
Now, of course, in the context of this are the people who own those businesses, some of whom are represented by such groups as AfriForum, and exactly. Who also have relationships with Elon Musk and so forth. So now there's a dynamic where we're seeing pressure groups within South Africa going to lobby based off of the economic power that they have. Some South Africans are saying this is treasonous because lobby groups can't come out of a country to go and lobby for, to call for sanctions on a country and so forth. What's your take on this? Because it's a fine line. Everybody lobbies. But where do we draw the line, especially when lobbying becomes this dangerous? Because Donald Trump is only acting off of the information he's been given.
That he's fed with. Well, there's a voice in the room for AfriForum right now. And that voice in the room is someone whose root is in South Africa and who is probably a victim or let me put it, who is probably trying to speak on behalf of his people. Now, AfriForum represents, let's call it by name, just call it, another name for it is White African Forum. A lobbyist group for the white South Africans who feel that they're losing out. And, everything is turning around now. It was okay while, you see, I don't think Ramaphosa is just taking the decision he's taking like that. ANC as a group, there are still many who fought, who are still alive today, who fought, before, who were involved in the liberation struggle, who are still alive today. And I recall an interview that when he was alive, Mandela, had when this white journalist was asking him, was talking about issues like why would they go with Cuba and some of these other, and he was wondering, where was America? Where were these other countries when they were in the trenches? These were the people that stood by them. You understand what I'm saying? The good thing, except that it was not replicated in their relationship with Nigeria, but I can say that although a lot of those countries that supported South Africa has, is paying them back well, because they are remembering that these people stood by them. Like I said, Nigeria is an exception. Maybe we have, it's like simply rivalry, and all that. But that's neither here nor there.
Still got an economic relationship.
Yes, of course, obviously, yes. So South Africa is being faithful to this relationship. The Russians and all the other countries that stood by them. America was never there for them. They turned a blind eye while racism and apartheid persisted in the country. So, and I think, which is why when BRICS came, it was easy to embrace it. Because you see, you stand with those who are your true friends, not fair weather friends, not those who will use you and dump you at will, or who are even working with people inside against you, as happened during the apartheid era. So it's what it is.
Well, since you brought up BRICS, how might this dispute affect South Africa's position as a BRICS nation and its relationships with alternative power blocs?
The good thing right now is that globally right now, where is multipolarism is what the situation is. Unlike in the case where it was first bipolar, you had the Soviet Union, you had America, and then with the collapse of the Soviet Union, it was just a unipolar world where America had the final say. But right now, that's no longer the case. So people have a right to align wherever they want to. And unfortunately, America is losing out now. South Africa quickly embraced BRIC, because there is no special relationship or nothing special they're gaining with their relationship with the US. And so for them, aligning with Russia, aligning with China and the other BRIC nations, if you look at these are emerging powers. So if you look at BRICS, Brazil, that is a bit somehow now because of the new leadership, but Russia, India, China, and then South Africa. It's an elite group. Economically, frankly, they can be independent. Mm-hmm. They can do without the dollar. They can't trade among themselves. China is a manufacturer to the rest of the world. Most of world trade is with China. You know, America right now even goes to, I mean, not right now, for a long time. You know, and you know, so they are deliberate about their decisions, and they have weighed all the options, and they see that, you know, America is just bluffing. It's no longer, the only thing America has to its credit today is its military might. You know, quite frankly. I'm not saying that may be all, but that's the only thing it can use to bully or try and shut other countries down. You know, but if you take away the military might, I mean, they're just as ordinary as any other nation. All
right. Well, Senator Ted Cruz, who is the chairman of the Africa Subcommittee on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, recently made a statement. He posted a tweet today saying that he feels that South Africa is going out of its way to alienate itself from the United States. And he brought in the factor that Pretoria has, of course, expelled the Taiwanese embassy from South Africa, stating that South Africa supports a one China, and we know that Taiwan and the US are allies. Now, to bring this into a broader context for the rest of Africa, the conversation in South Africa had some minister, for example, Minister of Mines, Gwede Mantashe, saying that, well, you know what, if America wants to behave this way, we should withhold our minerals.
Our resources, our minerals.
What are the steps we need to start taking as Africa now to level the playing field? Aid is gone. It might come back, we don't know, it might not. Now you're hearing such statements as, oh, if you're friends with this person or if you support this position, it means you're alienating yourselves from us. The rhetoric is very clear. The body language seems very clear. We are not helpless in Africa. What are the steps that you would say we need to take?
I think we need to learn take a cue from South Africa. Many African countries are asserting themselves right now. The Sahelian region, for instance, is asserting itself. I'm talking about with their position with France, you know, and they're saying, look, keep your aids. You know, we have more to offer. You know, we are not beggarly. We are a sovereign nation. If we use our resources by ourselves, we can survive. And don't forget, like I've said on this platform several times, that you see, the internet and modern education has leveled the playing field. Why do I say so? Our children go to school in these countries. We sit in the same class. We beat them. You understand what I'm saying? So they've been demystified. What they know, we know. We may not have the infrastructure on ground here, but all that is coming back to motherland. Okay? So what South Africa is doing and what the Sahelian countries are doing and a few other countries are doing, I think it's just right. If Africa can decide that, look, we don't need the West. Let's negotiate on equal terms. You know, when we come to the table, we keep our resources. You come with what you have, because without our resources, frankly, their factories will be closed down. There's very little that they can do. So a lot of what makes them tick comes from here, including human resources. American economy was built off the back of slaves, black slaves, okay, and so much more. So, I mean, you know, so I think it's time for us, it's time for us to assert ourselves and our true independence.
Very fine point to end this conversation. We'd like to thank you for your wonderful analysis, as always. African Affairs Analyst Dr. Victor Okhai, thank you for joining us here on Newsday.
Thank you.